So, Martin, welcome back to episode 4 of our podcast, and welcome to the show again. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, no, always a pleasure, Ralf. I must say, when you first said to me that you'd like to do a podcast interview, I thought we would be done and dusted in 30 minutes. I mean, I can't believe we're in episode 4, and I feel that maybe we haven't even touched base yet. But I'm pleased. I'm getting quite a lot of messages from people saying that they're enjoying the discussion. So long may it last.
Yeah, let's continue. And I guess when we are on episode 50 or 60, we are looking back and smiling and see how proud we were having done 4 episodes. So this can be a long story.
Okay.
Yeah, Martin, where we left off last time was at that time that you were in Pretoria, stuck in a quite successful business about photography, and later on also about cameras, selling cameras, and also about photography. And why I say, or why I'm smiling by saying you were stuck in this business is because many people would be very happy to be stuck in a successful business, but you weren't actually so happy.
No.
And you said there was an opportunity to teach on the university a photography class where you were quite scared of doing that, but finally you did it. How did this story continue then?
Yeah, Ralph, you are correct. I mean, sometimes you have to just check back and just say, wow, we actually were so blessed, because there you are right. There's many people who would be so grateful for, that type of a job, and the fact that it's very successful and it's all working out. So I do agree with that. But I underestimated the strength, what could you call it? The power of the calling of creativity, if that makes sense to you. So and certainly in my life. So for me, that became a frustration. I felt at that stage, I mean, how could I put this, Ralph? I felt like a caged animal who was being fed business, but I couldn't actually get out. And it was a very lonely space as well, because I couldn't share it with many, because I don't think people would understand. And again, they would look at you and say, "You are such an ungrateful person. Really, look at how successful this has been." And I mean, put yourself in this position. Very, very solid business partner relationship, now becoming very like good friends on top of that. And I couldn't speak to him about that too, because I don't think he would want to hear this. Wasn't the mission in the first place. So where does this come from?
Yes.
So it was a strange place. And you are also correct. I mean, that little teaching classes I did for a while, that just planted a seed. That, okay, this is something that you might be able to do. But it was nothing more than that. I remember that very good friend of mine who put me in that position. I'd done 1 or 2 or 3 classes, and he was super excited. And he got me onto a radio show or 2 where I had to talk about these photography classes. And I thought, this is strange. I mean, why would something so small now end up on a radio show? I mean, I was completely out of my depth, and I actually had no idea what was in store coming forward, and yet continue just day to day plodding along in a very successful business. My goodness.
How did you manage time at that time? Because you said you were working from 4 in the morning until 7 or later in the evening. How did you manage to teach actually in the university?
No, the university was after hours. So it was a part-time class for people who weren't enrolled or subscribed to the university as a student. This was just using the university's facilities to be able to facilitate an after-hours activity. So it was very informal. And I remember it wasn't a big thing. So, if I think I went once a week to go and teach the guys. So once a week I'd go down, and my class would be there, and they would not really know what was going to be part of that session. And I didn't even know what was going to be part of the session, to be quite truthful. And it all ended up really well. So but it didn't last for long. It was just a seed that was planted, a seed that became very important later on.
Mhm.
But a seed was planted there for sure. And you must remember that, I was young at that stage, so there's lots of energy. So it was just a fact. And I like getting up early in the morning in any case. Maybe it's just a habit that formed in any case from that time. I find my most productive time is from early hours of the morning through until when the first staff turns up. You're able to get through a whole lot of stuff where you're not sort of interrupted. And I'm that type of person who I don't like being interrupted. I'm not what could you call it? I just don't have that multitasking facility, or ability. So I prefer to just tick off the boxes while it's quiet, and then I can get on with the day after it. So I didn't mind that. It was getting home later that I minded. You must remember also at that point, Matthew, our oldest son, the first child to come along, had only just been born during that time.
Mhm.
So Anita didn't mind too much if I worked late. But then later I started to see that this would be an issue, certainly when you've got children and you want to spend time with them. So
Yes, I can very well relate to that. At the end, the business overwhelms you and takes all your time and your energy away, and you don't have time for the family, which is the most important thing, of course.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, that was a frustrating time for the creative side of photography, because the only time I really got to do some photography was when I took a week or two off and went off and took a break.
mm,
And I think it's the same for many people. Certainly, my students that I've been privileged to teach over time, I see it as a common thing with a lot of successful people, where photography is what they would like to do, even if it's on an amateur level.
mm.
And, it's what I mean, they've spent a lot of money on some good equipment. It's standing in the cupboard. They might have even done a class or two to learn how to use it. But the challenge is not that. The challenge is making time to continue. And, and then the camera only comes out the night before we leave on our little breakaway. Uh, if it, I don't know if, I mean, for me, the first 2 days of the breakaway, there's no time to photograph. There's only time to sleep. There's only time to rest. It's all, you just don't have the energy because you're now trying to recuperate. But sooner or later, that's where I would go to, because I'd start photographing, just for the joy of it, just because it was something nice to do.
Yeah.
And you would also, I think you would agree with me, sorry to interrupt you there, but you get home from those sessions, and I don't know if this is like with you, but even at that time when I was working in the retail business, but you get home, you end up back at the office. Before you know it, it's a flood of stuff. You get your films processed. Then I used to send them in for developing. They would come back. You'd have one quick look at them, and that was where it ended, because there was no time to get into. You didn't have a darkroom, or you didn't really want to print. You don't want to put pieces on the wall. There's no reason. There's no intent for it. And the camera then sits in the cupboard for yet another 8, 9, 10 months, whatever it is, until the next round. So
100%. But basically getting away from the place where you live, getting into a new environment opens up the mind for new ideas and new challenges. So it's very important.
yes,
In my opinion, when I leave the business and when I'm on holiday or on a trip, on even a business trip, ignites new ideas. It ignites new perspectives on business or on life in general. I want to ask something about the cameras, because you started off with a Pentax that you bought after your encounter at the beach at the very beginning.
yes, correct.
Then you got, I think, Hasselblad cameras, which you thought were film cameras when you were photographing in the Navy. And then you swapped to, I think, Nikon. Did you mention Nikon later? What was the camera at that time, and what? And as you had access to all big major brands,
Yes.
what was your favorite camera at this time? This was 30 years ago, you must mention. So this was not the digital cameras at that
No,
point.
it wasn't.
What were you using that time?
Yeah, you're right. Look, the whole journey started with Pentax. So I still have a soft spot for Pentax, by the way. Sometimes on bid or buy, or on our on our used what's it, Facebook Marketplace or something, a Pentax Spotmatic or a K1000 comes up for sale, and I'm so tempted just to buy it, just to rekindle those wonderful memories. But no, I when I got to the Navy, or to the reconnaissance forces as a photographer, I was issued with all the equipment. And although Hasselblad felt like a video camera to me at first, I didn't know what I was holding in my hand. It very quickly became an absolute joy. So still today, I've got this soft spot for Hasselblad. It's just if I need to be creative, Ralph, if I feel like I've got a project to do, and I just got to hold Hasselblad. I just got to hold it, and that energy flows from the camera to the body and to the mind, and we can get going. So I still got a soft spot for that, but I was issued with Nikon equipment then. It was the Nikon F1s and motor drives and film winders and all of that. And so even when I continued in the retail business, I still stuck to Nikon. And I think people listening to this podcast may agree with me, but if you're involved in photography or been involved in photography for a while, you tend to stick to what you know. It's like whether, when you drive a certain brand of car, or it's just you stick to it. Nikon feels like right-handed, whereas Canon feels like left-handed. So later I moved to Canon, and that's a story on its own. But I know I was using Nikon then. But Nikon wasn't my favorite camera, I must
And
tell you.
what was your favorite?
At that time, it was Leica.
Really?
Leica of all cameras.
German brands.
Yeah,
Nice.
Leica. Yeah, and my business partner, he he loved collecting cameras. He loved the stories of the history of photography, and he loved collecting older cameras and having them fixed and doing so. So for him, there was a lot of joy in the history. He could have opened a museum to. That was really what his passion for photography came from equipment. He loved equipment. He was the right person to sell equipment because he just loved it. And he had a Leica M3. No, actually, he had a whole lot of Leica, the M series, but eventually he had two Leica M3s, and I convinced him to give me the one, which I've still got today. So I've got the Leica M3 with a couple of lenses. Samantha, my daughter's now inherited them. She's just taken them. Well, she didn't inherit them. She just took it. So she's still shooting even today on limited film photography with my old Leica. But I didn't really respect. I don't know, or didn't understand the DNA behind Leica at that stage. I just knew it was a good brand, and then we got the Leica agency to distribute in our region. So we were doing so well at selling of cameras. They came to us and they asked if we would be their distributor in the region. So the South African agent asked if our company would distribute the Leicas for the region. So, of course, we jumped at that.
Of course, you jumped in. Yes, 100%.
Yeah, and they're not cheap. And they're not cheap, no. Yeah, so no, that's where my love for Leica actually turned up. But I was still shooting on Nikon.
Have you ever visited Leica, the company?
Yeah, yes. Funny enough, that was that's a beautiful story. That's a really, really interesting story. The Leica, we were doing very, very well, and they turned up one day, and they asked me if I'd like to visit Leica in Germany, and of course, I said without a doubt. So yeah, so we did a business planning trip, and my business partner said to me, "Well, if you're going to Germany, why don't you just hop over to London at the same time, and go and spend some time there among the big retail shops and go and see what they're up to. I mean, maybe we can learn something from there too." So before I knew it, I was packing my bags and heading off to Germany. I landed at Frankfurt Airport, and then I experienced German precision. in everything, from the meeting you at the airport, you hosting you, and all of that. And I had my proud Nikon on my back because I wasn't going to go without a camera. I didn't take the M3. It was an older model. I thought they wouldn't appreciate it. Later, I found out they actually would have. And I had my Nikons and lens with me, and got met at the airport. And before I knew it, I was checking into the Leica hotel in Wetzlar. And again, beautiful hotel, lots of atmosphere, lots of history. And it was precision.
Okay, and you
Everything
came
was
with
precision.
your Nikon gear to Leica?
Well, I did, yeah, at least with Nikon, I had more lenses, and, and I was traveling as well. I don't know, you stick with what you know. I mean, I walked into the bedroom that first day, and there on my pillow was an itinerary for the next 2 weeks, what time they're going to pick you up, and what we're doing. And I mean, it was phenomenal. And I got to the factory, and this is quite a funny story, but the first day I get to the factory, and I must just say, Ralph, if I mean, you German, so you can appreciate this, but if they say to you on your itinerary that the bus will pick you up at 20 to 8, then you must know that at 20 to 8, you can close your eyes, you can walk out of the door and climb onto the bus.
Yes, sure.
Yeah.
How else?
So, and I went into the Leica factory on the first day, and they greeted me as I came in. Actually, it was a couple of guys who had come from around the world who had been given a similar opportunity. And the host looked at me and he said, "What is that you have on your back?" Meaning my camera. And I said, "My camera." "Oh," he says, "Leica?" So I said, "No, Nikon." And it was this hush of silence in the reception area. And he said, you're not going to need that here." So I said, "Okay." And then he said, "No, but you're not going to need it at all. So would you mind just putting it down?" And there was a reception area where there was a lady in front on the switchboard. And I said, "You want me just to leave my camera here in the public area?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, you are being serious?" And he said, "Nobody would be interested. So it's not even worth locking up."
Yeah, you were at Leica, okay.
So I put the camera down, the camera bag down, and being a South African, of course, I was like, I just hope it's going to be there when I come back. So during that day, I kept going back to the reception area and just having a quick look to see if my camera's all right. Anyway, they made it very clear that I could return it to the hotel room, and I didn't need to come back with it again.
Okay. And during that time, you had the opportunity to use Leica cameras, I guess.
Oh, my word, I didn't just have the time, Ralph. They were the perfect hosts, I think, and me coming out of a creative photography background, and then understanding the equipment and the value of good equipment and excellent lenses. I mean, I remember that it was, I think, the third day after they'd taken you through the factory, and they'd shown you just the processes of being able to create excellent quality optics and all of that. I think it was about the third day. When I got there, they said, the host said, "Come with us." And they opened up this, I think it was like a safe. I'm sure it was something similar. And we went into this room, and on the left-hand side, I can remember it like it's tomorrow, there was the whole R series of cameras and lenses. So if it's an R, now I can't remember if it was the R4 or the R5 at that stage. That's the reflex camera. But there were 12 of them in diced foam, the camera bodies, but perfectly lined up. I think they took string and they made sure that everything lined up beautifully. Next to that, every lens from the wide angle through to telephoto, 12 of each, all in diced foam. And on the right-hand side, the M series. And they gave us he didn't even want me to use my gadget bag. So he gave a gadget bag, and he said, "We are going to start photography now. So you go and pick whatever equipment you want on any day, and you can test it, try it, play around with it. And then we went to another little space where there was film, there was Kodak film, there was Fuji film, there was Agfa film, there was slide film, there was black and white film, there was color negative film, whatever you liked or would like to try could help yourself. And when you get back to the hotel that evening, they pick up your films the very next morning. Your films come back processed.
Wow.
It was a dream time for me and in that 2 weeks, I didn't have to deal with any business issues because, that was just before cell phones, so there was no contact. If it was a serious message, the switchboard lady would get a hold of you. There was no contact. It was it was just beautiful camera equipment, lots of film, brand new environment. Welcome to heaven on earth, Martin. Welcome. That was what it was like.
What you told me is that you not only were an enthusiast of the equipment itself, but also the creativity that comes along with that. Have you had the chance to take pictures and to get some feedback on those or compare with other photographers? You were obviously not alone in this.
No, there was a group from around the world of, and I must admit, look, some of the other guys were serious retail specialists. So for them, they were more interested in the equipment, the cost of the equipment, the specs of the lenses, because they wanted to take that back to their customers. Me, Martin, was more interested in using the equipment, in actually photographing. So during the discussions and the lunch breaks and that, and especially at the end, I must admit it was right at the end, one of my colleagues from Johannesburg was with us as well, and I'd met a very nice person from London who was also involved in the retail of Leica. And we were just comparing photographs, and they both encouraged me. And then also the person who was hosting came and they looked at my work. Of course, I didn't see the value in it because that's what I do. And they all said, why don't you do this as a sideline? Look at, the quality of we were all in the same place photographing the same subject, whether it was a forest or a castle or wherever they took you for that day. And they said, but look, you've been able to create some memorable stuff here. And I took it as a compliment, but I didn't realize that, that this deep thing inside me to create was already starting to bubble over. But it was that particular breakaway that reignited my passion for getting out of the cage that I had gone and successfully locked myself into.
So you came for the equipment, but basically you got redirected to creativity and to photography.
Oh, and I loved it. It was, I didn't want those 2 weeks to come to an end. I just loved it.
Okay.
Just loved it, yeah. And there wasn't pressure of business because remember, and pressure of having to perform, because in the Defense Force, if you don't come back with it, you're in trouble. And in business, if you don't do it properly, you're not paid. So when I had the photography studio, I mean, it was all about delivering a result that the client would pay for. Here, I was given freedom. It was do whatever you like, have fun, enjoy. And that's why I think that's still, Leica has got such a soft spot when it comes to, what could we call it, the 35mm equipment if you want. And Hasselblad has got such a soft spot for the medium format.
I can really relate to that and to that feeling that you had. And again, when you come back then from this trip, you still, it's worse like coming back from holidays because you have new ideas and you must have felt that you are wrong in your position. There was another trip to London. Was this?
Yes, that was straight afterwards. So I jumped on a flight from Frankfurt straight over to London. My business partner saw an opportunity here to visit the top retailers in London and set up a
business, basically.
Back to business and set up a few appointments. They were reluctant, but they did see me. They were very nice about it. just to get some ideas on how they display work and how they sell, and just to go and do some reconnaissance, if you like, forgive that. And he told me very proudly that he had booked me in to a very nice place, or I think he said a nice place. He claimed later he didn't. And he said it's called Inn on the Square. I still remember the name, and arrived in London, and there I am walking around, my Nikon on my back, my small case. And I expected horse-driven carriages and these steps going up into this hotel, and they welcome you as you go in. And I couldn't even find the entrance of this place. And, after walking around in the drizzly rain for I don't know how long, finally found the entrance around the back alley, around the corner. And when I walked in, it was this dingy reception area that smelled moldy. And there was a lady sitting behind a glass-like thing, and she wasn't very happy to see me. Well, she wasn't happy to see anybody.
Welcome to London.
She really wasn't.
The mood is like the weather.
Yeah, and I got issued some keys, very little chat. Went up to the room, opened the room door up, and I promise you, Ralph, the room was smaller than my bathroom. It was this, and it overlooked this rainy, drizzly London. It didn't feel very good. And she phoned me just to see if I was okay. And I remember the phone ringing. I picked it up, and she said, "Hello, love, is everything all right?" And I said, "No, it isn't." And she said, "Oh, yeah." She got upset, of course, because she doesn't want anybody to complain, especially from Africa, my goodness. And I said to her, "I've just walked in and there's a Gideon Bible in my room." And there was this long pause, and she said, And I said to her, "Well, unfortunately, there's not enough space in this room for both of us, so one of us is going to have to leave." She didn't find it funny at all.
Yeah,
But
sure.
the gentleman I'd met on my time over in Germany, we got to know each other quite well. And after about 4 or 5 hours there, and I was thinking, oh, I'm going to spend 2 weeks here in this little dingy room. I better make the best of it. I got a call to say there's somebody down in reception area for you. And I thought, that's strange. Went down, and there he was. And he said to me, when you told me Inn on the Square when we were on the flight coming back, he said, I knew what you were in for. So he said, so my wife and I have made a space for you at our house out in the country. You're coming to stay with us.
Okay.
And back to photography, because that bug had bitten. So I got straight back. I went to visit my business, did all my business work. I mean, it was quite easy to do with the public transport that they have there, but I would get back in the afternoons, and they were out in the countryside, and I was able to go and take walks into the countryside and carry on with this whole thing, that my DNA of existence, really. Now with the Nikon back in my hands, it felt a little bit strange, but that was back. That thing that warms you up inside, that thing that makes your I don't know, that bubbly creative feeling that comes in your tummy when that excitement was there. And I'd never experienced little pubs, by the way. We have a lot of them now in South Africa, where you have your pub in the evening and you can go down and get your draft beer and a nice pub at lunch or a pub dinner, whatever it is. Never experienced that. Well, there I experienced that just about every night, because that was the way they lived. So, you'd come home, get dressed, and then off to the pub for a meal and socializing. And it was fantastic. It was a good time in my life, but it reignited what I needed it to reignite.
Yeah. Was this experience strong enough for you to take a decision, and was it the beginning of a decision to leave the business, or did you feel, okay, I can't leave the business side?
Yeah.
When I'm back, I will still have to work in this photography business?
Yeah, no, look, I did get back, and before you know it, we were on the hamster wheel again, and it was all same normal. It gave a debrief of the trip and put down my suggestions. But before I know it, in a small business, when you put up your hand, you say, this is a really nice idea. I think we should do this. Well, then it's, well, that's great. So then do it, because, you know, you put up your hand, you take the job. So before I knew it, I was even busier than I was before. And we had opened up a wholesale division on top of that, and another lab, which was all happening as well. And the wholesale division was for tenders and to be able to work in the big industry turnover, small profit, big industry. And we had hired a person who came in who was helping out with that division. She was very good at what she did, in fact, too good. Again, a story for another day. And that was flowing as well, but that was big volume business. So, you know, and we were starting to even move away from photography equipment. Now we were starting to sell televisions and microwave ovens and that type of thing through the wholesale division. So you can only imagine the intensity that you're walking back into, you know, was very far from the creativity that was just experienced.
And
so it didn't take long, and I felt like I'd never been away. But I think it was that trip that got me to now really, really, really consider what would be another option. And there was no solution, not in my mind at that stage. I couldn't drop my business partner. I didn't see an opportunity. Young family, you know, now our first child is there. And it didn't take long, maybe 6 months of that intensity. And I was at breaking point. Inside, I was at breaking point, because it's something that my wife was aware of it, but she didn't realize how much it had affected me. And it had stolen my joy. And I experienced joy again when I was back in, when I went over to Germany and then again to the UK. I experienced that joy of creating. But the moment I walked back into the business environment, it stole that. It took it away.
It's like a silent cry for help. Yeah, someone has to take me out there.
Yes. And I couldn't really talk to anybody about it because, again, sort of what we said in the beginning of today's discussion, it sounds selfish. It really does. It sounds, you cannot.
100%. You are in a successful business. You are very successful, and it sounds like, why wouldn't you enjoy it and find your place and find your passion in the business side and just transform your interest to the business? But yeah, it wasn't your dedication, I guess.
No, it was certainly not something I wanted to do for the rest of my life. And fortunately, but unfortunately at that stage, I did know that what I wanted a camera in my hands, and I wanted to create. And I knew what I wanted to do, but it's like looking from one mountain over to another, and the valley is just too deep. How are you going to get there? I didn't have an answer for that, Ralf. I didn't have an answer.
You once said, "Be careful what you ask for. You might get it."
No,
Get a turning point.
Yes, it was indeed. But it's no. What I said is, be careful what you pray for. You just might get it. So, and I think I've said to you on this on these talks that I moved to Pretoria to be part of a certain church, which I really wanted to worship at, and I suppose in all of this, the only place I could turn to was the sanity of my own faith. And I remember clearly, I remember what I prayed for. I can't tell you where it was. I can't tell you how many people were around. I can't tell you if it was with my wife or with a pastor or with, you know, a fellowship group or whatever it was. But I prayed specifically. And it wasn't a prayer. It was a rant and rave. I was upset, and I needed help. And it was that cry of helping, that prayer was, please, I've got to get this sorted. Can't continue like this. Help me, please, Lord. Help me, help me, help me, help me. Don't know how you're going to do it, but I don't know where to go. Just point me in the right direction.
Okay, and did the Lord deliver what you asked for?
Be careful what you ask for. You just might get it. it was in a way I had never expected. In fact, I didn't even realize until later on that what I had asked for was indeed unfolding, Ralph. And it unfolded very quickly because it was and again, I can't remember if it was a month or 2 or 3 months down the track. But the start of this whole thing of moving into the world of, which I thought was later would be the creative side of the studio photography and all of that, turned out being very different. And the way it was delivered was dramatic. It was over the top. It was disguised as a storm, as a tornado, which turned up in my life, which was just blew everything apart. And that's where the whole thing of getting back into creativity started.
Okay, and what happened actually?
Oh, Ralph, sure. It's like it was yesterday. Do you remember? This is how much I remember that particular moment. Do you remember when cell phones first came out? When we had our first cell phone, certainly for us in South Africa, and the leader there was it was Nokia and Motorola, and I had this brick of a cell phone.
Yeah, I also had this huge device.
And then the flap in the front that you flapped out, and then you pulled out the aerial, and then you had to stand and point it in the general direction to be able to hear properly. And I had one of those, and I was away from office that time. I was out on the road doing some things, and I got a call from my business partner, and I could hardly hear him at first, but what he said to me is, "You better get back to the office. You better get back to this is serious." And, I thought he's exaggerating. What is serious? What could be that serious? And I kept saying to him, but Bob, what's wrong? Tell me what's wrong. And he said, "Marty, we're bankrupt." And he said the word, but I thought he was joking. And I said, "Look, don't joke with me. I don't know if I heard you." And he said, "Listen, trust me, we are bankrupt." And it was like something that came in from somewhere that, I mean, I didn't expect that even to be an answer to prayer. In fact, I didn't even put 2 and 2 together. And I still thought, well, when I come in, maybe he's talking about a health issue, perhaps where he can't work anymore, and that's going to lead to bankruptcy, or maybe it's the lady that was working for us is not producing on the tenders anymore, and that's going to lead to us not reaching our targets, or, I was still thinking, well,
Came out of nothing and
out of
bankrupt.
And walked into his office. He was sitting there. He was as white as a ghost. The sweat was on his brow. You could see. And he looked up at me and he said, "We're bankrupt."
But how could this happen, that a formerly successful business, you're traveling to Germany, to London, partnering with Leica, and everything seemed to be working very fine and very successful?
You tell me, Ralph. That's the point, is that is what happened. And I mean, I don't know how much time we have today to discuss this, but it is a long story, because you need to understand it. But when you see or hear what actually happened, it makes logical sense.
Yeah,
but it came in from nowhere.
Was he hiding this before you? Because
No,
you did not realize the situation of the business until he said, "Finished."
No, he was a chartered accountant, and very good at it. And he had managed and run some big companies along the way. He was exceptionally good at dotting the I's and crossing the T's. He was very ethical. He would make sure that we had our monthly meetings. He'd bring me up to speed on the progression for the months. He was exceptionally good at planning. He was exceptionally good at forecasting and putting budgets in place, and very good at keeping those budgets. No. This came from nowhere, because there was nothing that he was hiding from me. But it turned up to be quite a serious issue at that stage. Yet it was the start to what I had asked for, and I didn't realize it.
Yeah. Now, yeah. Now your life was planned, and it could take another direction.
Well, I didn't realize that either. What I was worried about, I mean, certainly after a day or two that I had time to digest what was going on, now suddenly the focus was not creativity anymore.
It was
It wasn't this let's clap and because now we have an opportunity. No, now that feeling that you had in your tummy of creativity and that excitement, and now that was replaced with anxiety. Now there was a different feeling, a terrible feeling. And now the question was not about, I want to move over to creativity. Now the feeling was, how on earth are we going to survive? How are we going to keep the house? How are we going to keep food on the table? How are we going to fend for this little child that's turned up? No, now the whole thing was different. And now there was suddenly reality it came in from nowhere, and it was a punch of note. And it killed everything that I was now felt I needed to be. Now I would be just grateful to get back to business, really. If
100%. Yeah. Usually when you start after studying or after school and you start with creativity, you have time to play around. You don't need much money, but being married, you bought a house, you had a child. Now you had to make quick decisions.
Yeah, it's funny how your priorities suddenly shift.
Yes.
From where there was not a need to now suddenly, oh, well, there's a bond that still needs to be paid. There's a life that still needs to happen. And now we're talking about not even drawing a salary at the end of the month, or drawing a dividend or whatever it is. That money's gone. In fact, it's now shifted to, who do I owe money to? The banks, who were our great friend in the past, had now become it suddenly become well, I only found out later, because then I really found out how the banks operate and we were talking millions. So we are not talking just a couple, we're talking owing of millions. And even though I was still a junior partner in the business, I had already been given, had earned quite a lot of the shareholding over my time. So and with that comes responsibility. So, it's one thing being a shareholder, it's another thing being responsible for your actions. And the year I was now standing and facing this, what do you call it, Goliath? Here's this Goliath in front of you, this thing that you didn't even think was going to be there, and there it is. And like I said, I actually got really upset with my whole faith. I got because now, what do I do? And I'm asking on a few months ago for a creative direction, and now I find myself facing bankruptcy. So I actually got cross with the Lord. I didn't want to hear anymore. My faith was tested to the bitter end. It was like, well, thank you for that. Thank you so much.
Yeah. For taking me out of business and now letting me face bankruptcy. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Thank you, Lord. Yeah.
I don't really want to ask for much more. Or, the other hand, it was like, does this work? Does it actually work to pray? Because obviously it doesn't. I mean, that was the thoughts that were going on in my mind at that stage. But I was troubled. I was deeply troubled. I was thrown in at the deep end, where I'd experienced difficulties before, but not to the degree of this. This was now big financial difficulty.
Okay.
And we had staff as well. I mean, what about them? No, that was a strange place. So be careful what you pray for. You just might get it, because fortunately there's a silver lining here. Fortunately.
Obviously, there is a way, or there was a way out of that. And there was a story that continues, which we will cover in our next episode, Martin. But I will, as always, ask you the question: what were your major learnings during that time? What did you learn during the time at Leica, during the time after that in London, and during this challenging time when you faced bankruptcy?
I think the big thing for the breakaway to Europe was that creativity flows from a relaxed, attentive mindset. And so it's very difficult for us to become creative when we've got the buzzing of the world and the noise shouting from all angles. Even in a successful environment, that noise can be very heavy, and creativity doesn't really flow in that. So that taught me that when you take yourself, well, I didn't take myself out. I was invited out of that space, and in that space, the creativity could flow in a relaxed, attentive sort of environment, and that's where creativity finds itself. And then I experienced the joy of creating again within that. So that was the lesson I learned from that trip. Getting back and into the situation of retail again, I also realized that you can't serve two gods. So in the sense that I cannot come back with all of this energy to create and then move back into an environment where you move away from creating, but you're helping other people to create. So you cannot expect to do both of those in the same space. And in a busy world, in a busy environment, it's not possible. So that was the lesson that I learned from there. And certainly when we got faced with this Goliath challenge that suddenly turned up from nowhere, I realized that I'm a very, very small player in a very big pond, a very big world. So, and I realized as well that you've also got to be careful that when you are successful, the commitments that you think tomorrow would be okay with, and then you realize later that tomorrow is different, and now you have to actually stand up and have to face that and be responsible for those decisions. And I realized that the business world is a very, very, very cruel world, and a very difficult world to manage because you never know what's coming tomorrow. So I think those were the big lessons that I learned along that way, or certainly in this little chapter of what we call it, the podcast.
Okay. So thank you, Martin, for being so open and sharing these vulnerable moments in your life. And what I really appreciate is that when you are teaching and when you are telling something on the side that seems to be a little detail, it's really rooted on an own experience, and mostly on a deep experience that you made during your life. And that what make your teaching so relatable and so honest and so deep.
No,
Thanks.
thank you. I'll leave you with this as we leave today. But it became very evident to me that God is more interested in one's character than their comfort. And I think that the character, certainly with what I do and what I teach when it comes to photography and art and fine art photography, I think that does relate back to personal experiences for everyone. Every one of my students has their own individual life. They have their own individual challenges, and they're going through, in some cases, things that are nice, and in other cases, things that are not so nice. So, maybe the situation in my situation is different, but from an holistic point of view, maybe it's not that different for everyone.
At the end of the day, we all face challenges, and we have to take them and finally follow our passion. Martin, thank you very much for that time, for the episode, and I'm really even more curious and excited to hear how the story goes on in our next episode on this podcast. Thank you very much.
Good. Look forward to chatting again soon. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.